For nearly 3 decades, Bill Hemmer has been the calm voice Americans turn to when the world feels like it's falling apart. He's covered 9/11 from ground zero, reported from war zones, anchored elections, hurricanes, international crises, moments that shape history. His face is familiar, his delivery steady, and his professionalism almost unmatched. But behind all the headlines he's delivered, there's one headline he's never allowed the world to write. At 60 years old, Bill Hemmer, respected, successful, wealthy, and constantly in the public eye, has never married. And unlike most public figures, he hasn't just avoided marriage. He's avoided talking about it entirely. His 8-year relationship with supermodel Dara Tamanovich ended suddenly and silently. Every woman he's ever worked near has been dragged into rumor cycles. A doctored photo once spiraled into online speculation about his sexuality. And through all of it, Hemmer has chosen the same response every time: complete silence. But that silence hides a deeper story, one that reveals something most people never consider about living a life built entirely around news, deadlines, danger, and responsibility. Because the truth is this: Bill Hemmer didn't accidentally stay single. His entire life, career, and history point to a pattern. A pattern that explains why marriage may have never fit into the world he built. And once you understand that pattern, the mystery makes a lot more sense. Before Bill Hemmer ever stood in front of a camera, before he ever covered a single election or breaking news story, the pattern that would define his entire adult life had already started forming. And it began quietly, in Cincinnati, Ohio, long before anyone knew his name. Hemmer wasn't like most teenagers. While friends were focused on dating, school events, or planning out weekend fun, he was waking up early to host a student-run radio show. Not because he had to, but because he couldn't help himself. He loved the thrill of communicating, the timing, the structure, the discipline it required. Even as a kid, he had the kind of intensity you usually only see in adults who obsess over their craft. People who knew him back then said the same thing. He didn't just enjoy broadcasting, he lived inside it. It wasn't a hobby, and it wasn't a phase. It was the first sign of a mindset that would follow him into adulthood. When Hemmer commits to something, he commits completely. By the time he reached Miami University, that intensity had only grown stronger. He studied broadcast journalism with the kind of focus other students rarely had. While most people in college explore, experiment, and try to find balance, Hemmer built his life around one idea: becoming the best journalist he could possibly be. This wasn't normal ambition. It was a lifestyle. He buried himself in media studies. He chased every opportunity. He lived with the seriousness of someone who already knew the world was watching, even when no one was. And even back then, something subtle but important became clear. When Hemmer focuses on a goal, everything else fades into the background. Dating, relationships, long-term plans. None of those stood a chance against the drive he already had. The truth is, the story of why Hemmer never married doesn't begin at 40, or 50, or after a bad breakup. It started in these early years, when he built a life that revolved around work, ambition, and constant forward motion. And that early momentum would launch him into the next phase, the one that would push his personal life even further into the background. Because once Hemmer entered television professionally, the pace of his life changed forever. And what happened next would shape not just his career, but the very reason he remains single today. After college, Hemmer didn't waste a single second. He walked straight into television, landing his first real role at WCPO in Cincinnati. It wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't national, but it revealed something important about him. He wasn't built for slow progress. He wanted to be where the real stories were happening, not sitting behind a desk waiting for something exciting to fall into his lap. His colleagues noticed it almost immediately. While other young reporters focused on the basics, Hemmer obsessed over precision, timing, and getting every detail right. He didn't just report sports. He studied the craft of broadcasting like it was the only thing that mattered. And in his world, it probably was. This is where the second phase of the pattern began. Hemmer wasn't someone who clocked in and clocked out. He was someone who absorbed the job until there was nothing left to give. Long hours didn't bother him. Constant movement didn't drain him. If anything, he thrived on it. And major networks noticed. In 1995, CNN offered him the opportunity that would completely redefine his life. With one phone call, Hemmer went from a regional anchor to a national figure. And once he stepped into CNN's newsroom, his world accelerated into overdrive. Suddenly, every major story of the late 90s and early 2000s required his presence. He wasn't just covering the news, he was living inside it. The turning point came in 2000, during the Florida recount. While most reporters rotated in and out, Hemmer stayed. Day after day, week after week, running on hotel food, power naps, and adrenaline. He became so reliable, so constantly present, that viewers began calling him the Chad Lad. It was the first real demonstration of how far he was willing to go for the job. And here's the part most people miss. That kind of lifestyle leaves no space for a personal one. Not dating. Not long-term plans. And definitely not marriage. But CNN was only the warm-up. Because once September 11th happened, Hemmer's relationship with the news transformed into something much more intense, and much more consuming. And that's when the sacrifices truly began. What he did next would push his personal life even further away than ever before, and set the stage for the bachelor life he still lives today. If Hemmer's early career showed signs of sacrifice, what came next erased any remaining chance of a normal life. Because once he stepped into the heart of the biggest stories of the 21st century, his personal world didn't just shrink, it completely disappeared. When the towers fell on September 11th, Hemmer wasn't watching from a distance. He came straight to ground zero, diving into chaos while most of the country stood frozen. The smell of smoke, the sirens, the desperate faces. He stood in the middle of all of it, reporting as the nation tried to understand what had just happened. People close to him say that 9/11 changed him in ways he never talked about publicly. Something about witnessing that level of destruction, not from a studio, but from the street, pulled him even deeper into his work. And once that switch flipped, it never turned off. Because the next step was even more intense. Hemmer went to Afghanistan. He reported from Iraq. He covered stories in places where stepping outside meant stepping into danger. These weren't assignments journalists took for fame or career points. These were missions that required a special kind of mindset, one willing to accept emotional exhaustion, physical risk, and long stretches away from any sense of home. And this is where the third piece of the pattern locked into place. Hemmer didn't just cover breaking news. He became addicted to being in the center of it. The pace. The adrenaline. The sense of duty. For some people, that's overwhelming. For Hemmer, it became normal. But that normal came with a price. War zones don't come with predictable hours. Breaking news doesn't respect birthdays, anniversaries, or date nights. When you're one of the few journalists who can handle that pressure, the industry keeps calling, and you keep answering. While others his age were getting married, building families, and settling down, Hemmer was on the other side of the world, standing in the middle of conflict zones, holding a microphone instead of a relationship. And the truth is, once you spend years living in conditions where every day is unpredictable, chaotic, and emotionally heavy, stability becomes foreign. Marriage becomes complicated, and the idea of slowing down starts to feel impossible. Hemmer wasn't avoiding commitment. He was living a life where commitment simply couldn't survive. But his most defining transformation was still ahead. Because after CNN, came the move that changed everything. Fox News. A platform that amplified his presence, his workload, and the public's fascination with his personal life. And that's where the rumors began. When Hemmer left CNN and stepped into Fox News in 2005, it wasn't just a career move. It was the beginning of a new chapter where his public visibility exploded. Suddenly, he wasn't just reporting the news anymore. He was becoming a familiar face in millions of homes. Morning after morning, year after year. His work on America's Newsroom turned him into one of the network's most trusted anchors. But with that trust came something he never sought. Constant public fascination with his personal life. Because while Hemmer's reporting style was calm, controlled, and professional, the audience's curiosity about him was anything but. The first wave of rumors didn't come from scandals or controversial photos. They didn't come from anything he said or did. They came from something much simpler. Chemistry. Viewers noticed the easy back and forth he shared with his co-anchors, Sandra Smith, Megyn Kelly, and later Dana Perino. Their on-screen rapport was smooth, natural, and genuinely enjoyable to watch. And because Hemmer shared so little about his personal life, people began filling in the blanks themselves. Online forums speculated. Blog posts popped up. Social media threads started connecting dots that weren't actually connected. And none of these rumors were based on anything substantial. There were no photos, no statements, no real evidence. But when a public figure stays silent long enough, the silence becomes a canvas, and the public paints whatever picture they want. Rumors about Sandra Smith grew so intense that news outlets eventually had to remind people she was married with children, and the speculation had no foundation. The same cycle happened with Megyn Kelly. Friendly interactions on live TV somehow morphed into secret relationship theories. Then came Dana Perino. Their partnership became one of the most recognizable duos in political broadcasting. The comfort between them, the rhythm of their conversations, the trust that showed on camera, it made viewers wonder if there was more happening behind the scenes. But Perino has been married for years. And Hemmer never addressed the whispers. Not once. His silence kept the mystery alive. And the more he ignored the speculation, the stronger it grew. The public didn't understand why a man with his success, his status, and his charm never revealed anything about his relationships. So the curiosity turned into theories. And the theories turned into rumors that followed him everywhere. This was the beginning of a new pattern, one that still defines his public image today. Every woman near him became a headline. Every co-host became a talking point. Every interaction became evidence. And the less he gave the public, the more they wanted. But all of this was still surface-level noise compared to what happened next, the only relationship Hemmer ever publicly shared, and the one that ended in complete silence. Because the one woman he actually dated for years vanished from his public life without a single explanation. For all the speculation, for all the rumors and guesses about who Bill Hemmer might be dating, there's only one relationship the public ever actually knew about, and it lasted longer than most celebrity marriages. Yet it ended with a level of silence so complete that to this day, nobody can fully explain what happened. Her name was Dara Tomanovic, a Canadian model whose career and lifestyle seemed almost opposite of Hemmer's. She was discovered by Karl Lagerfeld in Paris at just 18, worked with fashion houses across Europe, appeared in British Vogue, Marie Claire, L'Oreal campaigns, a world full of cameras, lights, glamour, and movement. Hemmer, on the other hand, spent his days in newsrooms, war zones, and political coverage. Serious environments, heavy stories, high responsibility. And yet, somehow, the two of them fit. They reportedly met in Paris, and from 2005 to 2013, they stayed together. 8 years. The longest, most consistent relationship Hemmer has ever had in the public record. But despite both of them being public figures, their relationship was almost completely private. No interviews. No magazine spreads. No social media posts. Just quiet presence. Two people who appeared together at events and then vanished back into their personal lives. 4 years it worked. A journalist who lived in chaos and a model who lived in a world of perfectionism and performance somehow found a middle ground. Friends described them as opposites who balanced each other well. Hemmer's seriousness softened by her charisma. Her high-profile world grounded by his calm. But in 2013 everything changed. No breakup announcement. No sources close to the couple explanation. No official statement. One day they were together. The next day, they simply weren't. And that silence triggered even more speculation. Shortly after the breakup, Tomanovic was arrested for driving under the influence. An incident that dragged her name back into the spotlight and, indirectly, dragged Hemmer's with it. People began digging, asking questions, trying to connect dots that weren't meant to be connected. Those familiar with Hemmer's world say the real issue wasn't scandal. It was timing. His schedule had become even more intense. More travel. More breaking news. More unpredictable days that turned into unpredictable weeks. And that created a challenge no couple can easily survive. Journalism at Hemmer's level isn't a job. It's an emergency line that never stops ringing. And while Tomanovic had a demanding career of her own, the imbalance became too much. When your partner can leave the country with 12 hours notice, planning a life together becomes almost impossible. And here's the part that shaped everything after. This breakup didn't just end a relationship. It ended Hemmer's willingness to share anything about his personal life ever again. After 2013, he didn't publicly date anyone. He didn't acknowledge a new partner. He didn't appear with anyone in public again in a romantic context. His privacy, already strong, became impenetrable. And the silence that followed created a vacuum that the public filled with theories, rumors, and assumptions. But that quiet wouldn't last forever. Because a few years later, one shocking incident forced Hemmer to break his silence and address speculation in a way he never intended. And that moment changed the conversation around him entirely. 4 years after his breakup, Bill Hemmer kept a low, controlled, almost impenetrable level of privacy. No public partners. No dating confirmations. No statements. Nothing to feed the rumor cycle. And for a while it worked. Until 2019, the moment everything shifted. Because that year, an image began spreading online. An image that would drag Hemmer into one of the strangest and most uncomfortable controversies of his entire career. It started with a shirtless photo that quickly went viral, claiming to show Bill Hemmer in a way the public had never seen him before. Social media exploded with comments, jokes, assumptions, and most notably, a flood of speculation about his sexuality. But there was one major problem. The photo wasn't real. It was a manipulated image, an edited version of a well-known picture of Tiger Woods. Someone had taken the original, altered it, and posted it online as Hemmer, knowing it would stir conversation. And it did. It spiraled into something bigger than a joke. Bigger than gossip. Bigger than a harmless meme. The fake photo started fueling theories, accusations, and assumptions about Hemmer's private life. Assumptions that had no factual basis. People began treating the edited image like evidence, as if it revealed a secret he'd been hiding. Reports claim Hemmer was disturbed enough by the situation that he went to authorities about the doctored image. Not out of panic, but to establish the truth. Because this wasn't just a rumor. It was a fabricated piece of proof that could damage his professional credibility. And that's when Hemmer did something he almost never does. He responded. Live on air, in an offhand but unmistakable remark, he referenced having a girlfriend. An unusually direct statement coming from someone who avoids talking about his relationships entirely. But even then, he didn't share details. No name. No confirmation. No photos. No clues. Just enough to shut down the speculation. And nothing more. To this day, people still debate whether that comment meant he was actually dating someone, or whether it was simply a way to quiet the chaos created by the edited photo. There was never a follow-up, never a clarification, never another public reference to any partner. What made this incident so impactful wasn't just the controversy itself, it was the way Hemmer handled it. He didn't defend his personal life. He didn't open the door to transparency. He didn't explain or elaborate. He simply put out one line, one tiny fact, and then shut the door again, harder than ever. And that silence created even more questions. Why so private? Why so closed off? Why was marriage, or even acknowledging a relationship, something he avoided so intensely? The answer isn't dramatic, or scandalous, or hidden in some dark secret. It's something far more human, and far more revealing about the way he built his life. Because the real explanation begins the moment you understand what Hemmer chose instead of a traditional personal life. And why. And that takes us into the truth most people overlook. The truth that finally explains his bachelor lifestyle. 4 years, people have tried to explain Bill Hemmer's bachelorhood with rumors, theories, and guesses. But the truth isn't hidden in a scandal, or a secret partner, or anything dramatic. It's in something far simpler, something most viewers overlook completely. Hemmer didn't avoid marriage. He built a life where marriage couldn't survive. The deeper you look, the clearer the pattern becomes. His entire adult life was shaped around unpredictability. When most people were forming routines, Hemmer was living inside emergencies. When others were building families, he was flying into crisis zones. And when people his age settled into steady relationships, Hemmer's schedule was anything but steady. Breaking news never waits. War zones don't pause for date nights. Elections don't care about anniversaries. Hurricanes don't reschedule themselves. There's a reason so many seasoned journalists struggle with relationships. The job demands you be everywhere, all the time, with zero emotional stability. And Hemmer didn't just have this lifestyle. He embraced it. He became the anchor networks could rely on at any moment. The guy who could get on a plane with half a day's notice. The journalist who stayed up for 14-hour breaking news cycles without breaking down. The one who volunteered for the toughest assignments because he felt responsible to do so. And when you live that way year after year, something happens inside you. Routine becomes foreign. Stillness becomes uncomfortable. Predictability becomes impossible. Marriage isn't just love, it's presence, stability, and emotional bandwidth. And Hemmer's life was built around the opposite. Movement, disruption, and constant pressure. The remarkable part is that Hemmer never complained about this. He never framed it as a sacrifice. He never hinted that he felt he was missing out. If anything, every sign points to the idea that he found fulfillment in the exact lifestyle that made relationships difficult. His newsroom became a second home. His colleagues became his daily companionship. His career became his long-term commitment. Even outside work, he channeled his energy into other forms of connection. Philanthropy, veterans organizations, family roots in Cincinnati. These were his ways of giving back, of creating meaning, of forming bonds that didn't require the compromises a marriage would. To some people, this might look like avoidance. But to others, it looks like someone who is genuinely satisfied with the life they built, even if it's different from what society expects. And that's why Hemmer's bachelor lifestyle makes sense. It isn't rooted in fear or secrecy. It isn't driven by rumors or speculation. It isn't a mystery to solve. It's a consequence of devotion, a life built around purpose over partnership, responsibility over routine, and commitment to a profession that demands everything. Marriage requires space. Hemmer spent his life giving that space to his work. But there's still one more layer, the final piece that explains why he's remained so comfortable in his private, quiet, solitary world. Even as the public keeps asking for answers he never gives. And that takes us into the final section, the truth about Hemmer's philosophy on privacy, relationships, and the life he chose to live on his own terms. In a world where celebrities live stream their relationships, announce every milestone online, and open their personal lives for attention, Bill Hemmer stands as the complete opposite. His silence isn't an accident. It's a philosophy, one he's maintained for decades without slipping. Because for Hemmer, privacy isn't about hiding something. It's about protecting something. He built a career around delivering the news, not becoming it. He spent years reporting on people whose lives were torn apart the moment the public got too close. He saw what happens when fame exposes vulnerabilities. And somewhere along the way, he made a decision. His personal life would never become a storyline. So he created boundaries most public figures don't have anymore. He doesn't post his relationships. He doesn't share emotional details on interviews. He avoids the spotlight outside the newsroom. He keeps the focus on the work, never on himself. And that decision, more than anything else, unlocked a truth most people miss. Hemmer lives a life he doesn't feel obligated to explain. He doesn't need a spouse to validate his success. He doesn't need children to feel fulfilled. He doesn't need the public to understand his choices. And he doesn't crave the attention that comes from sharing intimate details. Instead, his life is filled in quieter ways. He returns to Cincinnati every year for philanthropic work honoring his grandfather. He supports veterans, dedicating time and energy to causes deeply meaningful to him. He builds strong professional connections that give him community without the pressure of a traditional family structure. And he pours the rest of his energy into the thing that's defined him since he was a teenager: journalism. People often assume that being unmarried must mean something is missing. But Hemmer's life challenges that idea completely. For him, bachelorhood isn't a gap. It's a choice that aligns perfectly with the way he lives. And when you look at all the pieces together, the relentless career, the unpredictable lifestyle, the emotional toll of crisis reporting, the quiet philanthropy, the intense privacy, the refusal to entertain rumors, the picture becomes clear. Hemmer didn't choose not to marry because he feared commitment. He chose a life that didn't require marriage to feel complete. His fulfillment comes from purpose, not partnership. From service, not spectacle. From a career that gives his life meaning, even when the world wants a different story. And maybe that's why the question, why isn't Bill Hemmer married, has never bothered him. Because to him, the answer isn't complicated. It's not dramatic. It's not scandalous. It's simply this. He's living the life he wants, not the one people expect. And in a world obsessed with knowing everything about public figures, maybe the most powerful thing Hemmer ever did was decide that some parts of his life belong only to him.